Hello and welcome to Tov TV, the Jewish news channel. This is a place to be if what you're interested in is to hear a genuine, connected to the earth, down to earth voice from Israel, voice of Israelis, right to your ears, the content as it is without being mediated and distorted by traditional media. And today we are very pleased to welcome Professor Yonatan Dubi from Ben-Gurion University in the Negev. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Ziv. Thank you for having me.
So you are in quite a unique position because you just came back from a tour as an Israeli academic in the United States. Now we are almost 4 months into the war, 4 months since the terrible massacre in October 7th. About 2 months after the turmoil that happened within the echelon of American academics when three heads of universities refused to condemn anti-Semitism in the campuses. And my question to you is, when you come back from there, can you describe a new era over there? Is it safer for Jewish students, for Israeli academics, to go around to express their academic and non-academic opinions over there now?
So the answer is not unique in the sense that yes, there is a change, and that change can be seen on many levels. But no, there is still no solution to the generic problems for example, Jewish students in Ivy League colleges, for example. Let me explain what I mean. I mean, we saw in the almost immediate aftermath that two out of the three presidents were essentially forced to resign, and the president of Harvard, in a way, shamefully resigned from her position. And you can see the pushback with faculty members sending letters, and with civilian groups denouncing the testimonies by these presidents. And so you do see a change. However, this change is very slow. So, for example, I had a discussion with someone in Los Alamos in New Mexico. His son goes to Northwestern in
Mhm.
Chicago, and he tells me quite strictly that his son is still afraid for his personal safety, and you cannot go around campus wearing Jewish symbols, a yarmulke or Star of David,
Star
things
of
like
David
that.
on your neck, yeah.
Yes, so Jewish students are definitely still afraid for their personal safety, and there are demonstrations which might become vocal and or even violent. So this is a very slow process, but
So
definitely you can see the pushback coming from academics and from the American public, from the American elite public, people who care about these institutions and understand that this DEI thing went just too far.
So there is the campi themselves that you're describing, a very slow movement towards a more tolerant atmosphere over there, and there is the response outside of the campi. And I mean specifically, we've heard some news about very prominent law firms in Manhattan, Jewish-owned law firms, that up until now only admitted candidates and lawyers that graduated from schools like Harvard, now declare that they will not whatsoever accept any graduate of Harvard and of any other university that refuses to condemn anti-Semitism in the campus. And the same that goes for law firms also go for broker firms. Now, can you eliminate the extent to which such decisions and proclamations have any effect on the American academics, on the American public as a whole?
I think they do have. I mean, first of all, let me say that what you describe is not just limited to law firms and broker firms. I have colleagues in universities who told me very directly that Harvard students are no longer automatically admitted to graduate schools. Something that 10 years ago, if you graduated from a physics or chemistry degree in Harvard, you would automatically be enrolled into a graduate school in other universities, and this is no longer the case. So clearly, the value of the Harvard brand has been deteriorating for many years, and it's clear that DEI policies have everything to do with that. So this is already happening. But I can tell you, for many talks, many discussions that I had with just people in the hotels, in gas stations, and in the academia, in the places where I visited, um, that the support for Israel and the rage against this DEI policy is quite astounding. People are now no longer afraid to say quite out loud that this DEI thing is nothing more than racism in disguise, and express very clear views. Something which maybe 5 years ago people would be more, I would say, careful in outstating.
Yeah.
It's now out in the open, and everyone that many people that I met were very clear about it.
So my social feed currently is quite washed with the new hip hop song by Ben Shapiro and Tom McDonald's, "Facts," which basically expresses the blunt response of the American right towards the DEI and towards the woke vocabulary, what is allowed and not allowed to say. And I want to ask you to step for a moment out of the campus and share with me some of the impressions that you get from sitting out there wherever you are and meeting daily Americans, lay people, face to face. Can you sense that this song that gathers quite positive response, even from the African American community in the States? Can you say that something is happening? There is a shift in the way that people look at you as an Israeli, as the topic as a whole.
I definitely, I can just tell you a quick story. I spent a few days in Aspen in Colorado. So in the evening we sat around the fire, and I have Jewish markers on my body. It's very clear that I'm from Israel, and I do not conceal that. And I had a lovely discussion with a guy who is a constructor, a construction project manager in Aspen. Has nothing to do with academia. And we were just talking, and he asked me where I'm from. I say he's with Israel. And the minute I told him that, it opened up an entire discussion where basically he ranted for, continuously about how this progressive movement has ruined the spirit of America. And this is a story. It was quite amazing to see. And that's what I mean when I say that people who were opposed to DEI policies and to this progressive ideology now feel free to declare this in public and to act upon it. And I see people in academia, which are typically more, they say, okay, this is politics, I'm going to do my science, I'm not going to worry about the outside world. I see people from the academia, in universities, in public research institutions, vocally and publicly expressing their opinions and fighting to stop DEI policies in their institutions, no longer hiding behind okay, I don't feel good, no apologies needed anymore. And I think this is something that, for example, the Ben Shapiro clip states out loud. We are no longer apologizing for opposing these terrible, destructive policies.
Well, I can only be envy about the way that those kind of shifts can happen freely in the United States. Here in Israel, we are still stuck with the fact that the majority of Israeli people are politically conservative, are naturally and instinctively against those vibes, yet in some mysterious way, they manage to hit roots in the institutions themselves. We know that here in the Ministry of Justice, we have a DEI department that basically umbrellas the entire country. Do you have such a department in the university where you work? What are the responses to it?
So let me again be optimistic. Yes, like every university in Israel, we also have a DEI office. And, we occasionally get emails from the Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion. However, there is a pushback in Israeli academia, definitely in my home institution, there are people who stand guard to make sure that whatever these offices are planning will be done in a very careful way, which will not harm at least the academic activities of the university.
Yeah.
And this is a general statement. The DEI offices in universities have become a tool to shift the university from an institution which is devoted to scientific inquiry into a political tool, into a political, a party or a political tool aimed at generating societal change.
Hmm.
And this is something the American public has finally realized, that Harvard University is no longer a university. It's just a left
A political
ideology think tank,
establishment, yeah.
a
It's a,
political establishment.
yeah, an
And we have
ideological
people.
greenhouse. And it's very interesting to see the fact that the American public basically have the effective tools to fight back, which we in Israel still have to learn how to utilize. Because you say that there is kind of pushback from the staff of the Ben Gurion University, but even though there is such a pushback and people guard against diminishing the meritocracy in the university itself, we won't see, for instance, this department goes away. This mouth tax that is being paid for the progressive agenda stops to be paid this way.
So I think this has to do with the structure of how our higher education institutes are built, and the way they are on one side coupled to the state, because every shekel that we get is public money, but on the other hand have an almost complete political separation, and that generates a situation, for example, that the Minister of Education has very little power
Mm.
over a university administration. And in many, many ways, this is a good thing, right? Because we do want our institutions to be free to pursue their own academic activities without being owed, without owing anything to the government. On the other hand, there are no watchdogs to university. So
Yes,
the only
let's
watchdog for the is
dwell into it just for a
community.
moment, because there is a very realistic and very logical distinguishing between academic freedom and between administrative aspects of managing a university. And what we see in Israeli universities that exist in American institutions as well, but to a lower level, is that the institutions, whenever a Minister of Education, which is a public elected, that basically finances those institutions on behalf of the public, wants to intervene in administrative aspects, not in educational and academic aspects of the university's work, they immediately raise the flag of academic intervention and of academic freedom, and this way they gain complete independence and push back every attempt to intervene. And one of the outcomes is the fact that every university, all 8 of them, has, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, this is an order by the Central Academic the Council for Higher Education in Israel, that orders them to have a DEI department, even though this is something that the students and the Israeli public that finances those universities is not at all interested in.
I can give you a stronger example. I mean, if you go back, in ancient history before October 7, Israel was politically torn regarding to the judicial reforms or whatever judicial revolution, however you want to call it. And essentially all university administrations took political sides
Yeah.
and shut campuses down for rallies and demonstrations, taking a very clear political side about something which should be left outside of the campuses, because campuses should be politics free in that sense. I mean, of course, you want to have debate inside the campus, but you don't want the institution itself to have a
Yeah.
political inclination. And
The
this went, of
concept that
course,
yeah, that you have an establishment inclination in this way goes against what
exactly,
academy is supposed to be about. Professor Anton Dorby from the
exactly.
University of Ben Gurion in Negev, it was fascinating, and I'm quite pleased to hear an optimistic tone in the discussion that we had about the discourse in the United States, both in general and in the academia itself. Thank you very much for this conversation.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
And thank you to our viewers. We want you not only to enjoy our content, which is, by the way, available in plenty platforms that you can access it from. We also want you to share it with whomever you think that might be interested in hearing a genuine voice from Israel, a voice of truth, a voice of faith, a voice of recognition in what the majority of the Israeli public is thinking and speaking about. This is something that you will not hear from the established media that it is coming from Israel. So this is us, you are you. Please watch all of our contents, share them, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And until next time, thank you very much and see you later.